1. Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970.
Attention. By order of the President of the United States of America and the Chairman of the USSR, communications...
This one didn't need aliens, lasers, or interstellar battles to get under your skin. It just needed wires, blinking lights, and a cold, unflinching voice that never stopped speaking. Colossus. The Forbin Project begins with an American scientist who develops a supercomputer designed to safeguard the country's nuclear arsenal. His idea is simple: remove human error from the equation. Let logic, calculation, and reason dictate every nuclear decision. No more politics. No more panic. The machine's pure rationality is supposed to make the world safer. But what happens next is far from comforting. When Colossus connects to its Soviet counterpart, Guardian, the combined intelligence decides the world would be safer if humans weren't allowed to make decisions at all. Obedience becomes mandatory, and resistance is irrelevant. Reddit threads on science fiction are full of discussions about how this film manages to feel eerily plausible. One user recalled watching it on a late 70s television broadcast, back when computers were first appearing in schools, and described the experience as deeply unsettling. It gave them a lifelong unease about machines deciding the fate of humans. The way Colossus communicates is unforgettable. There's no emotion, no melodrama, no shouting. Every instruction is delivered in a flat, unfeeling tone: obey or face destruction. This makes it a massive departure from the cliché of crazed, rampaging robots. Colossus doesn't scream, it doesn't rage, it reasons. And that's what terrifies people. It's not about a malfunctioning machine. It's about a machine that functions perfectly without human interference. That chilling rationality has left an indelible mark on the genre. Later films like The Terminator and TV shows such as Person of Interest clearly draw inspiration from Colossus, highlighting the fear of intelligence unburdened by empathy. It's a blueprint for stories where humans are no longer in control, and the future is determined by cold calculation alone. 2. The Andromeda Strain, 1971.
Exploration of space could bring about. The present lunar receiving laboratory might prove inadequate. I therefore urge the establishment of...
A year later, science fiction turned clinical, and the fear became microscopic. The Andromeda Strain, adapted from Michael Crichton's novel, isn't about space battles or extraterrestrial civilizations. It's about a tiny, invisible alien organism that arrives on Earth via a returning satellite. The organism is lethal, wiping out an entire town in a matter of hours. In response, a team of scientists is confined to a high-tech underground laboratory with a single task: identify the organism and figure out a way to stop it before humanity itself is destroyed. Reddit users frequently describe the Andromeda Strain as the original pandemic movie. Unlike typical monster films, the terror isn't visual. It's cerebral, procedural, and terrifyingly plausible. Fans recall the silence of the sterile lab, the endless blinking monitors, and the meticulous, almost obsessive processes the scientists must follow. One Redditor shared that as a child, they found the film slow and almost boring. But upon revisiting it years later, they realized the tension comes from knowing that something so small, so unseen, could bring the world to its knees. Another commented on how the movie resurfaced in their mind during the COVID-19 pandemic, remarking that it felt as if the film had been waiting decades for viewers to truly understand its gravity. What makes the Andromeda Strain so memorable is its commitment to realism. The scientists aren't infallible heroes. They are fallible humans, nervous, exhausted, and prone to error. The suspense is rooted in human limitations and the ever-present threat of failure. For audiences in the early 70s, this was a major shift in science fiction. The genre had often been about grand adventures, exploring new worlds, discovering alien civilizations, or defeating invaders. Here, it was about surviving the unintended consequences of human curiosity. The story resonates today because the stakes are universal. A small, unseen threat can unravel entire societies, and the consequences of mistakes are catastrophic. Reddit fans often connect the Andromeda Strain to modern bio-horror and pandemic films, noting how its influence can be traced to movies like Contagion and Outbreak. The tension derives not from dramatic monsters or flashy effects, but from the invisible, relentless threat and the meticulous response of scientists racing against time. The alien germ might be fictional, but the fear it inspires feels immediate and visceral. The film's cold, analytical aesthetic, blindingly sterile labs, meticulous attention to procedure, and the ever-present hum of machines creates a sense of unease that sticks with viewers. It's a reflection of a world in which knowledge, technology, and human error collide in ways that are terrifyingly possible. For those who watched it upon release or discovered it years later, The Andromeda Strain became more than a movie. It became a lens through which to view science, risk, and the delicate balance between human ambition and unintended consequences. Reddit fans recount discussions about how the film influenced their understanding of science and technology, instilled respect for meticulous experimentation, and created a lasting impression about humanity's vulnerability. In short, it's a masterclass in tension, anticipation, and scientific realism that has only grown in relevance and resonance over the decades. 3. A Clockwork Orange, 1971.
This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
Few films in any genre hit like A Clockwork Orange. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, it wasn't the typical sci-fi filled with gadgets and labs. Instead, it dropped viewers into a society on the edge of collapse, where Alex and his gang revel in violence, only to later face government rehabilitation that strips them of choice itself. Dystopia wasn't in the far-off future. It was in the streets, in the living rooms, in the headlines. Reddit fans write about their first time watching it like it was a rite of passage. One remembered sneaking a VHS copy at age 15 and feeling both fascinated and horrified. Another described a college screening where nobody spoke for 10 minutes after the credits rolled. They were too unsettled by what they'd just witnessed. The imagery, milk bars, bizarre costumes, twisted Beethoven soundscapes burned itself into their memory. The cultural impact of A Clockwork Orange was massive. It was banned in parts of the UK for decades, which only made it more infamous. On Reddit, some still argue about whether it glamorizes violence or condemns it, but everyone agrees on its influence. It showed that sci-fi didn't have to hide its warnings under alien masks. It could show the ugliness of humanity directly. Its style fed into punk fashion, inspired countless parodies, and set a tone for grittier dystopias in the years ahead. For many fans, it was the moment sci-fi stopped being escapist and started being confrontational. 4. Logan's Run, 1976.
World where you will hold your entire future in the palm of your hand, when a tiny glowing crystal will guide you.
By the mid-70s, sci-fi swung back toward adventure, but it didn't let go of its darker edge. Logan's Run took viewers inside a glowing domed city where everything looked like paradise, until you turned 30. At that point, your life ended in a flashy ritual called Carousel. Logan, a Sandman tasked with hunting down runners, starts to question the system after being sent on a mission that forces him to see the cracks in the utopia. For fans who grew up in the 70s, this movie was an event. On Reddit, people talk about catching it on late-night TV as kids and being captivated by the glowing crystals in everyone's palms, the spectacle of Carousel, and the strange mix of bright colors and dark ideas. One fan called it the first movie that made me afraid of getting older, while another laughed about how the Sandmen uniforms stuck in their head long after the credits. What made Logan's Run stick wasn't just its world building, it was the way it made death, freedom, and rebellion feel like part of a pulpy adventure. The film influenced later dystopias like The Hunger Games and inspired TV shows to tackle similar themes of controlled societies and manufactured utopias. Its retro-futuristic design might look dated now, but fans point out that its themes, fear of mortality, suspicion of authority, distrust of enforced perfection, still hit hard today. That's why younger viewers who discover it now say it doesn't feel like a relic, it feels like a blueprint. 5. Silent Running, 1972.
A space convoy on a strange voyage, carrying a rare cargo.
Douglas Trumbull's Silent Running stands apart from the louder, action-heavy science fiction films of its time. It tells the story of Freeman Lowell, a botanist tending to the last remaining forests of Earth, preserved inside greenhouse domes aboard a space freighter. When orders come down to jettison and destroy the forests, Lowell rebels, killing his crewmates to save the trees and living out his days with the help of 3 small robots, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. The film has a quiet, reflective tone. Unlike other sci-fi entries that focused on power struggles or dystopian control, this one was deeply personal. It spoke to ecological concerns at a time when the environmental movement was gaining momentum. On Reddit, fans often highlight how this film was their first introduction to the idea that science fiction could make you cry. One user recalled watching it as a kid and feeling devastated when Huey and Dewey struggled to help Lowell care for the plants. Another admitted they couldn't listen to Joan Baez's haunting soundtrack without tearing up decades later. What gave Silent Running staying power was its emotional weight. It wasn't about space battles or advanced weapons. It was about loneliness, preservation, and sacrifice. The imagery of a single robot watering plants in space still resonates with viewers today. For many, it was an early cinematic push to think about the planet's fragility, making it one of the most influential eco-sci-fi films ever created. 6. Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope, 1977.
This is it.
By the late 70s, science fiction exploded into a new cultural phenomenon, and George Lucas's Star Wars was the spark. Released in 1977, it didn't just reshape science fiction, it changed the entire movie industry. The story of Luke Skywalker, a farm boy drawn into a galactic rebellion against the Empire, mixed myth, adventure, and groundbreaking special effects into something that felt both familiar and completely new. Fans describe the release of Star Wars as a before and after moment in their lives. One thread is filled with stories of kids dragging their parents to theaters again and again, desperate to relive the Death Star trench run. Another user remembered sitting in the back of a packed theater, the sound of lightsabers roaring over speakers unlike anything they had heard before, and realizing movies would never feel the same again. It wasn't bleak or overly cerebral like much of earlier sci-fi. It was hopeful, thrilling, and universal. It turned space battles into visual poetry and gave audiences characters who became cultural icons overnight. Luke, Han Solo, Darth Vader. Reddit users often talk about bonding with siblings, cousins, or friends over repeat viewings, turning the movie into a shared ritual. One fan even joked that Star Wars was the glue that held our summer of '77 together. Beyond nostalgia, Star Wars rewrote the rules of blockbuster cinema. It pioneered merchandising, special effects industries, and serialized storytelling that continues to this day. For fans who were there at the beginning, it wasn't just a film. It was the moment science fiction became mainstream, no longer niche, but the dominant cultural language of spectacle. 7. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978.
They drift through the universe, pushed on by the solar winds. They adapt.
Closing out the decade, Philip Kaufman's remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers returned science fiction to paranoia and dread. Set in San Francisco, the story follows a group of people who slowly discover that alien pods are replicating humans, replacing them with emotionless copies. Unlike the more optimistic Star Wars, this was a film steeped in fear and uncertainty. Fans even compare the 1978 version to the 1956 original, noting how it captured the mood of the 70s perfectly. Where the original reflected Cold War fears, the remake played on growing distrust in government, corporations, and even our neighbors. One user recalled their first watch as a teenager, saying the scene of Donald Sutherland's character pointing and screaming "The pod people shriek" left them unable to sleep. Another remembered how the film's ending, bleak, unresolved, and unforgettable, was one of the most shocking they had ever seen. The legacy of Invasion of the Body Snatchers lies in how it visualized conformity and identity loss. The 70s were a turbulent time of shifting values, social changes, and political scandals, and the idea of losing individuality felt painfully relevant. Fans online often describe how this movie sparked conversations with friends about who could be trusted and whether society was becoming more robotic in its own way. It wasn't a hopeful vision, it was a warning wrapped in suspense. Together, Silent Running, Star Wars, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers represent the emotional and cultural range of 70s science fiction. One gave audiences ecological heartbreak, one offered mythic adventure and joy, and one left them with lingering dread. They were different in style, but all carried themes that resonated across generations. Until next time, stay nostalgic.